Prince William recently uncovered a truth buried deep within the inner circle of the Queen's household, a secret that had been carefully hidden for over 26 years. The moment his team confirmed what Laura Lopez had quietly walked into, everyone inside Kensington Palace understood that there was no version of the story that ended without serious consequences. We are talking about two iconic pieces of jewelry, a rare black diamond pendant and a delicate, intricate sapphire bracelet. These items, coupled with solemn promise made to a grieving teenage boy decades ago, had been compromised. What initially appeared to be a standard, private family matter was rapidly crossing into constitutional territory, and Prince William had already decided exactly what he was going to do about it. To understand why William moved with such startling speed and clinical precision, we must look back to the origins of this unfolding crisis, weeks before it reached the public eye. It arrived in a way most devastating realizations do, quietly without fanfare and buried inside routine correspondence. A staff member at Kensington Palace was processing incoming documentation from a major auction house when a specific image appeared on their screen. It was a standard catalog photograph, two pieces of jewelry resting against a neutral, professional background. It was the kind of image prepared for private appraisal, logged under a civilian name, and flagged for nothing in particular. However, someone in that room recognized them immediately. They were not recognized because of a recent sighting. They were recognized precisely because they had not been seen in over 2 decades. They were never supposed to appear anywhere again. The first piece was a black diamond pendant suspended on a fine chain, its setting unmistakably from a specific mid-90s era. The second was a sapphire bracelet, incredibly intricate in its construction, a piece that does not belong to the category of anonymous or mass-produced vintage jewelry. Both had been worn publicly by Princess Diana. Both had been photographed extensively. Both existed in documented palace records tied to a name that needs no introduction. The staff member did not simply send a routine reply to the auction house. They did not file the image away and move on. They picked up the phone. Within minutes, the image reached the inner circle of William's team. Within the hour, the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace had shifted entirely. There were no raised voices, no dramatic displays of anger, and no visible signs of crisis from the outside. Instead, there was a particular quality of stillness that those familiar with the palace recognize as the moment before something very large and very deliberate begins to move. When William was shown the photograph, he looked at it for a long, silent moment. He did not call Camilla. He did not request an informal conversation through family channels. He did not ask for a diplomatic explanation or seek a quiet, behind closed doors resolution. He made one call to his legal team at a firm that handles the crown's most sensitive matters. The conversation that followed was not exploratory. It was operational. The name attached to the auction catalog entry was Laura Lopez, Camilla's daughter. The pieces she had submitted had been logged under her name as civilian property. Nothing special, nothing flagged, nothing that would raise an alarm to anyone who didn't know exactly what they were looking at. But that was the problem. Someone at Kensington Palace didn't know exactly what they were looking at. In legal terms, what appeared to be a private appraisal was significantly more serious. By having the pieces officially cataloged under a civilian name, particularly pieces that had been kept outside the formal Crown Estate Registry for so long, the process would effectively legitimize a claim of private ownership. The royal provenance would not be removed dramatically. It would simply fade from the official record. Once these pieces existed as documented private property, recovering them through legal mechanisms would become exponentially more complicated. William understood this. His team understood this. And in the quiet, controlled hours that followed, it became clear. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate plan, and it had come within a single auction entry of succeeding. However, the jewelry was only the surface. What William had already set in motion weeks before that image arrived told a far larger story. In May, William made a decision that those inside the royal estate system immediately understood as something other than what appeared on paper. He liquidated 20% of the Duchy of Cornwall's entire commercial real estate portfolio. The figure involved was massive, in the region of £500 million, pulled from active markets in a single, coordinated movement. The official statement was simple: focus on local housing initiatives and community reinvestment. The kind of headline that generates public approval rather than administrative scrutiny. But inside the palace, among the advisors and financial administrators, the reaction was not approval. It was recognition. For years, a network of private trusts and civilian-adjacent funds have been operating in the gray areas of the royal financial architecture, quietly routing wealth toward Camilla's circle rather than the direct line of succession. William had been looking for them specifically, and in one coordinated movement, he shut them down. The financial restructuring that William initiated was not merely an act of budget consolidation. It was a tactical maneuver designed to strip the institutional support from beneath Camilla's network before the main confrontation arrived. When the jewelry finally appeared in the auction house catalog, William did not need to scramble for strategy. He was already prepared. He understood that to regain control of his mother's legacy, he could not simply rely on personal requests or family appeals. He needed to exert the weight of the institution itself. He drove to Sandringham, carrying a leather binder that contained a document prepared by his legal team with extraordinary, cold-blooded precision, a letter's patent for asset reclassification. This was not a casual request. It was a constitutional instrument grounded in centuries of royal legal precedent. It stated in unambiguous institutional language that if the reigning monarch was unable to adequately protect the crown's historical properties, whether due to diminished physical capacity or compromised executive function, the heir apparent held a legal standing to petition the Privy Council directly. The implications were catastrophic for the stability of the current household. It would position William as Prince Regent, effectively stripping the king of executive authority over those specific assets until the matter was resolved. William placed a binder on the table, the silence in the room heavy with the weight of what was effectively an ultimatum. He explained to his father that there were only two paths forward. Charles could sign the decree before him, officially reclassifying Diana's jewelry as crown property held exclusively for the direct line of succession, thereby bypassing Camilla's household entirely. Or, William would take the matter to the Privy Council, and the question of the king's capacity to protect the institution's assets will become a matter of formal, permanent constitutional record. This was not a bluff. William possessed the documentation. He had the legal standing, and Charles, advised by his own team, understood the reality of his position with perfect, painful clarity. The signature was provided. In that singular act, the jewelry was formally reclassified. It was now designated exclusively for the direct line of succession, entirely outside the reach of anyone connected to Camilla. But the significance of that moment extended far beyond the jewelry itself. It was a reigning monarch acknowledging that his heir possessed both the standing and the sheer willingness to remove power from him if he refused to act. The balance between father and son had shifted permanently. Charles walked out of that room still a king, but the institutional hierarchy had been fundamentally altered within hours of the king's signature. The machinery William had prepared went into action. This was not an emotional conflict. It was procedural, cold, and executed with the clinical precision of the British legal system. On the 23rd of May, a Mariva injunction was submitted to the High Court. This is one of the most aggressive financial tools in British law. It does not issue warnings. It does not negotiate. It freezes everything. Every account associated with Laura Lopez, every investment portfolio, and every trust fund linked to her name was locked instantly. Alerts were sent to every major financial institution, from Coutts to Barclays, and the compliance was absolute. Laura's entire financial life was paralyzed. She could not move money, liquidate assets, or withdraw funds. The following morning at 5:30 a.m., while most of London remained asleep, officers arrived at Laura Lopez's estate in Wiltshire. This was not a courtesy call. It was a High Court enforcement order backed by a ministerial-level search warrant. The document carried a weight that could not be deflected by social standing, family connection, or any form of appeal. The search was conducted with military-like efficiency. The black diamond pendant and the sapphire bracelet were found, documented, and seized under official record. The operation was thorough, precise, and entirely free of the public spectacle that the palace usually fears. By the time William was ready for the world to know, he had already secured the evidence he needed to close the loop on this investigation forever. The High Court audit had been designed to bring a definitive close to the dark chapter of missing royal artifacts, but as the final files were compiled, a revelation surfaced that shifted the entire landscape of the investigation. The two recovered pieces, the black diamond pendant and the intricate sapphire bracelet, were not the entirety of what had vanished in the High Grove repository over the decades. In fact, forensic accountants and legal auditors discovered that those two items were simply the only ones that had not yet been successfully moved out of the country. The repository had originally contained 14 documented artifacts. 12 remained entirely unaccounted for, scattered into the shadowy architecture of international finance. The forensic paper trail told a chillingly sophisticated story. The 12 missing pieces had been systematically transferred through a network designed with surgical precision to obscure both origin and destination. They were now held within an anonymous private holding company registered in the state of Delaware, far beyond the immediate reach of the British legal system that had moved so swiftly to freeze Laura Lopez's accounts. Delaware was chosen not by accident, but as a deliberate architectural shield. Whoever orchestrated this movement understood precisely where British legal jurisdiction ended, rendering a high court injunction or a ministerial search warrant completely powerless against an overseas corporate shell. Buried within the leaked Ministry of Justice file containing this audit was one additional detail that stopped investigators cold. A specific code name attached to the center of the wider operation referred to in the confidential documents as the Montecito Connection. For anyone tracking the modern geography of royal estrangement, the implication was unmistakable. It pointed directly across the Atlantic toward an individual who had spent years navigating a public separation from the institution, possessing both the motivation and the resources to harbor fragments of Diana's personal legacy beyond the crown's grasp. For Prince William, the emotional weight of this discovery was staggering. He had cornered his king, mobilized the full legislative force of the monarchy, and achieved total institutional victory. Yet 12 irreplaceable pieces of his mother's history remained locked away across an ocean. Realizing that legal mechanisms could not cross international borders to retrieve the remaining artifacts, William chose a different kind of weapon: absolute, unyielding symbolism. Weeks after the audit concluded, William and Catherine appeared together at a major public royal engagement. The event itself was standard for the royal calendar, but what Catherine wore around her wrist sent a shockwave for the gathered dignitaries and press corps. It was a completely different piece of Diana's jewelry, one that had always remained properly documented, carrying no legal ambiguity whatsoever. It was worn proudly, publicly, and without a single word of explanation from the palace communications team. For those who knew what to look for, the message was deafening. It was a closing statement delivered entirely through institutional presence. Diana's legacy was secure, it was protected, and it was being worn by the future queen, completely bypassing any alternative claims or shadows cast by rival circles. Camilla was present at the same engagement, maintaining the flawless composure that decades of royal life had taught her, but the symbolic and institutional distance between them was palpable and permanent. The line had been drawn, held, and made permanently visible to the world. Yet, the shadow of the 12 missing pieces in Delaware remains. While the Diana Heritage Trust stands as an ironclad legal fortress, ensuring that future generations within the direct line of succession will inherit what remains, the missing artifacts represent a lingering fracture that time alone cannot heal. The palace continues to project its traditional facade of unwavering stability, managing public perception with the quiet discipline it has practiced for centuries. But behind closed doors, the reality is forever altered. A king was pushed to sign away executive control under the unyielding pressure of his heir. A network of hidden influence was dismantled down to its foundations, and a future king proved that he would stop at nothing to protect his family's history. The two pieces came home. The 12 remain across the sea, and in that profound silence lies a royal truth that the world is only beginning to understand.